We are starting our sixth online UCAB international event dedicated to the Ukrainian agricultural sector in Europe and EU-Ukraine relationship in all matters related to agriculture. My name is Nazar Bobitsky. I am the Brussels director of the Brussels office of UCAB, Ukrainian Agribusiness Club, a leading Ukrainian association representing farmers and agricultural enterprises in Ukraine, with a strong interest in European affairs and Ukraine's European future. Today we have a very interesting, I would say, a very attractive, even sweet topic. We will be talking about EU-Ukraine relations and trade in the sugar market. And I have a pleasure to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers today. We start with Mr. Taras Kachka, Deputy Minister of Economy and Ukraine's Trade Representative. Alex Lisica, founder and current president of UCAB and the author of the idea of UCAB online fireside chats, our monthly or even more often online events dedicated to Ukrainian agriculture sector in Europe. We also have very distinguished and interesting panelists joining us today. Ms. Yana Kavushevska, Executive Director, Ukrainian Association of Sugar Producers. Mr. Christian Spiegeler, President of the Association of French Sugar Manufacturers, presenting European Association of Sugar Manufacturers. We also have Mr. Yuri Sharanov, President of European Committee of Sugar Users. And last but not least, Mr. Igor Shiluk, CEO of Signet Company, a Ukrainian sugar producer. So to start, I'm inviting Alex Lisica, President of UCAB, to unveil the scene. Please, Alex.
Thank you very much, Nazar, for very nice introductions, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really happy having you today and discussing a very sweet topic, which unfortunately between European Union and Ukraine, not really sweet, I would say, is actually more hot than sweet. Anyway, over the last 2 years, we have had different discussions with our European partners about sugar, and it looks like really that one of the most crucial and most discussable topics is the sugar export from Ukraine. Everybody knows that European Union imports annually about 4 million tons of sugar. Different types of sugar from Ukraine are coming to less than 10%. Every year is the same discussion based in Brazil or actually in Poland or somewhere else, what to do with Ukrainian sugar in Europe. My idea before we've started actually such kind of events was to go from the emotional part of discussions about sugar, but not only about sugar, and moving to the professional part. So that event today should be not a political, emotionally driven event, but more professional, but we can try to find something together because we strongly believe that Ukrainian way to European Union is not stoppable. So we are going to European Union and we try to find kind of compromises. How can we live in the future together? So that one event is one part of the many other events where we are trying to find on a professional basis actually common things for the common future in the European Union, for European Union, but also for Ukraine. So I wish all of you here a huge success, and I wish our event today a fruitful discussion about very sweet and very hot topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Before we move to our keynote speaker, Mr. Taras Kachka, I have a few house rules to announce today. We are very happy that, as usual, our audience join us from Ukraine and from Europe. We invite our listeners to post their questions, if they have any, to our panelists in the chat box window or in the Q&A window online of our event. And in the end of our discussion, we'll have a 20 minutes time for panelists to answer your questions. And in the meantime, I am inviting Deputy Minister Taras Kachka to set the scene in terms of, let's say, the expectations of Ukrainian government and their views on EU-Ukraine trade in agricultural products today. As we know very well, there has been a third uh, extension of exceptional European Union trade measures, liberalizing trade between EU and Ukraine in order to support Ukraine in its economy, in its war effort, to repel the Russian aggression. But this year, as you may know, this year the ATM regime has been accompanied by a number of so-called safeguard measures, and sugar is featuring prominently there. Mr. Kachka, it would be very interesting for us, for our audience, to hear your views, the views in Kiev, of what do you take of current setup of EU-Ukraine trade under the EU autonomous trade measures? What do you take of it today, and what are the expectations for the future? Because as we know, the ATM regime has a limited time frame. It will expire in June next year, and situation remains very contested. And sugar is considered one of the sensitive products for the EU, for the European farmers, and the European Commission had to take this into account when designing the current shape of trade liberalization measures for Ukraine. Mr. Kachka, Taras, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this topic. So the topic is indeed quite sensitive even for discussion. I think that we went through very let's say not so delicate discussion on sugar during last year. In case of Ukraine and the EU and sugar, I think that the story is quite long. So that's that is something that we need to take into account before any talks on trade. And before we will talk about ATM, I think that we need to take into account that in our negotiations on association agreement, so that 15 years ago, or even more, like 17 years ago, so that sugar was the topic that where Ukraine was quite defensive. So that's at that time our industry was lived through very painful transformation. So that we were in a stage of very rapid shrinking of our production capacity for sugar, so that we started the transformation of the market with 170 sugar refineries or sugar plants, and now we have around 30, yes, so the 33, 40, 34. So depending on the season that actually starts, let's say here and now, yes. So that's now we have the start of season of production of sugar in Ukraine, and before the war, so in 2020, in 2021, for us, for our domestic policy on sugar was rather different than what we have now. So in 2020 we had a deficit on domestic market or on sugar, and we were quite active in looking for import of raw cane sugar from other continents, and we've been encouraging the production of this kind of sugar so cane sugar in Ukraine, since we have deficit domestically without even exporting. So that's why we have really a new situation for Ukraine in 22 and 23, and this as well, even in the time of function of autonomous trade measures, the issue of the balances on domestic market was quite sensitive, and in 2022 we even introduced a temporary prohibition of export of sugar because for the food security reasons, because of deficit of sugar on domestic market. So in the end of marketing year, so in July and August. So that's why I think that we need to talk about the future of let's say trade between Ukraine and the European Union on sugar from perspective of development of industries. So that's we are conscious that within the European Union, in this longer period, the same things happened. So that's there were a lot of restructuring, optimization of production capacities in the European Union in previous decades, as well as in Ukraine. However, in Ukraine, I think that the biggest difference is that in Ukraine it was really done without any major support from the government. It was rather really market-driven development. While in the European Union, so due to the well-defined common agricultural policy, there was a very, let's say, smooth transition. However, it was, I think, that radical and of course, as well, painful for market operators as well, because some of them left the market in the EU as well. So this is the, let's say, context of what happened when ATM were measures, were introduced by the European Union. The decision was a political one, so that and we really appreciate this decision by the European Union, because it helped in many products to survive. So, like in case of eggs, for example, we've been cut from our markets of export in Middle East due to logistics, and that's why the European EU access to the EU market was actually, I would say, salvation for this industry, which has suffered a lot in Ukraine, because we lost really big factories producing eggs that were situated close to front line in the south of Ukraine. So that's why for this market it was really good. For wheat, for example, the ATMs helped to simplify the formalities of let's say, trade through the EU. So of course, later it resulted in very specific figures in terms of customs statistics, that the wheat that actually went to third markets was calculated as first an import to the EU and then export to other states, and it led to the very hot debate about the actual trade flows. But nevertheless, this is a separate topic. But even in terms of simplification of customs formalities, the ATMs helped us a lot. With sugar, we have very particular situation when ATMs coincided with the change in the EU markets. Yeah, so that's I think that it is clear that the demand on at the EU market in 2022 and 2023 rapidly grew, and the question mark was whether these, let's say, demand and the prices, so that where this demand should be covered by import from which jurisdiction, and the fact that ATM allowed the export of sugar from Ukraine to the EU actually led as well to the increase of production of sugar in Ukraine. And I think that here in this particular market, a particular product, we had a situation when our producers actually, let's say, increased production. That was really good for Ukrainian economy. I think EU consumers were as well satisfied because of access to this product, and of course EU producers were scary, because you know that it's absolutely going in almost any situation that the rapid inflow of product from new markets, or like from Ukraine to the EU, are usually scary producers of any products, not only sugar. I think that if you in case of sugar, it will be I don't know, glasses or I don't know, laptops, or electric vehicles, like here. It scares national producers. So that's why I think that this discussion on sugar and its sensitivity was unavoidable when new ATMs have been discussed. But so that's why I think that what happened was really unavoidable. But the question, what lessons we should learn from it and how we should proceed further. In our opinion, I think that we need to understand whether this increased demand on and the new level of prices is a long-term story for the EU in general or not. We need to take into account that Ukraine is integrated into the EU markets. So we need to take into account the history of transformation of sugar industries in Ukraine and the European Union, because in my opinion, what we have now is a result of this transformation in both, let's say, EU and Ukraine. And as well, we need to also to design the new, let's say, peaceful approach to trade in sugar. What I believe and what is our vision on this. So that first of all, I think that for certain period of time, we need to have a predictability in trade flows. And to this end, Ukraine is open for different type of, let's say, self-control of trade flows, like in terms of export licenses or other instruments that can help actually to increase the transparency in trade flows. That this is something what we heard as a sensitive and critical for EU producers. We believe that we need to take so that the EU should take Ukraine into the account in terms of calculating balances, because Ukraine is a neighboring jurisdictions with a similar situation or similar structure of production of sugar as in the EU, and that's why taking into account our integration to the EU, we need to be taken into account in this, let's say, global balance on sugar markets. That will allow as well to also to liberalize further trade in sugar while maintaining the predictability of these trade flows in a way that will not damage any interest of EU producers of sugar. So this is the context, and I hope that we will continue our work in forthcoming months with new European Commission within these modalities that will allow us to modify the association agreement under Article 29 in a way that will reflect new realities, because let's say the comeback to the solution that was envisaged 17 years ago when we negotiated initial association agreement is outdated in any case, so that this small mutual quota does not serve interest of both Ukraine and the EU, so that we need a new equilibrium, new approach to the market access. And in my opinion, it should start with some steps on reflecting the actual demand and so supply demand between Ukraine and the EU, and should lead to the full liberalization of trade for let's say in predictable future, and supported by the instruments that actually illustrate that these trade flows are transparent, predictable, and controlled by Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Kachka, for this very, let's say, comprehensive overview of where we stand, both the European Union and Ukraine, in how the sugar sector developed in our respective places. And also, let's say, what was important to hear, I think, for our audience is that, in fact, sugar sector is one of the excellent examples how the Europe's additional trade preferences helped sustain a very important sector in Ukraine's agricultural setup and help it to revive and to contribute to the overall resilience of the Ukrainian economy. Now, I hope Minister Kachka will be able to stay with us a little bit longer for the panel, as we will try now to unfold a little bit and answer some questions that arise in the context of our discussion. I would like to present to you three broad topics that I would like to cycle through our panel. Question number one would be how we assess the impact of Ukraine's sugar import on the EU sugar market in terms of consumption, prices, and the position of both European sugar producers and the effects, the benefits for the Ukrainian sugar exporters in the course of 2022-2023. The second question would be how important have been the sugar exports for the Ukrainian agriculture and economy at large, considering that in overall, the agricultural exports constitute more than 60% of the country's export revenues, hence they are very important for the country's economy. And last but not least question, perhaps the defining question, will be what's next? How Ukraine and the EU should manage their trade in sugar beyond the current ATM package, which will expire in June 2025. So question number one, the impact. I invite our distinguished panelists to each to take their turn in answering this question and share your views and opinions about this. Perhaps, if I may make the first, I'd say the liberty of the first move, and perhaps invite the representatives of the consumer side, the European consumers of sugar, which is represented by Mr. Yuri Sharanov. Yuri, if I may offer you a floor and give the perspective from the point of view of industrial consumers of sugar in Europe, to be followed by Mr. Christian Spiegeler, who will then respond and also offer the perspective from the point of view of European sugar manufacturers. And then, of course, to be followed by Jana Kavushevska, who will provide the perspective from the Ukrainian exporters side. Yuri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Taras. Yeah, well, probably where we're starting from is have a look a little bit like kind of fundamentally on the European market from few previous years, and to see the sugar trade flows, let's say. And from last several years, we can see that pretty much the Europe been always rather like structural importer of sugar, having more like a net deficit. So importing sugar more than exporting out of it, especially as sugar as such product. And what this deficit been somehow increasing in the last several years, and in 22-23, particularly what we've observed and what we've experienced, this deficit went quite to some extreme points when Europe had to import over 3 million tons of sugar. Typically, that would be an average would be like around 2 million. That one in 22-23, those years we see like the import was even like 1 million ton more needed. That created quite a tight market situation. We can say like we've seen this market quite unbalanced, skewed to quite a big deficit. It was also
very quick interjection, Yuri. I do apologize for interrupting. I'll be sharing a few slides from the European Commission presentation, which has been published in August this year, and I think it's very relevant here. Here's the slide of giving the sugar balance globally. Please continue.
Sure. So as said, the market we can say market been quite unbalanced, with a quite significant need of import. And it was evidenced as well by the prices. The European sugar price has been one of the highest prices in the world. The prices we've seen in 23, where the prices peaked. I think there were like historically high prices in Europe. Europe has never seen such high prices in sugar before. And obviously, when the commodity market operates like this, when you have a big deficit, obviously it incentivizes more supply, and the market is trying to resolve the problem and to balance itself. And hence, luckily, we had Ukraine to support on this and deliver some of their surplus, helping to balance market situation. And now European market is a bit more balanced, and also same as like European trade flows now, and Ukrainian trade flows as well, obviously under under safeguard measures, so we don't have Ukrainian sugar coming much now into Europe. But obviously, like in 22-23, the situation was quite critical, and Ukraine played a big role in resolving that deficit. You may argue then, yes, so obviously how the deficit is resolving, you're moving towards more balanced situation. The prices also peaked and probably coming off now from that peak, but that's not European exceptional situation as well, because that's again the whole commodity sector globally in the world. So, for example, world market prices, they peaked in 2023, and they came off from the highest level more than 30% already. And pretty much all of the markets globally in the world, if you look at the sugar prices in 24, they somehow lower versus like the peaked prices in 2023, where was a much bigger deficit, and it was incentivizing a bit more supply. And I think from users' perspective, obviously 22-23 was quite tough years in terms of sometimes like having difficulties even like finding enough of sugar, making sure you secure enough of supply of sugar. And lots of users were quite worried, even like if they will be able to get enough of supply in such deficit market, and they will be able to carry on production consistently and not being impacted. And I think that's why it's important to have a bit of a diversification in the supply, and having different access to different origin, and luckily Ukraine had provide this support. We've also we've seen the evidences as well when the market clearly needed this sugar. Something like in 22-23, Mr. Taras Kachka was mentioning that when Europe had to put their own export limits to protect their own domestic market because it was already at risk of running out of sugar, we had the evidences that some of member states, like Romania, for example, was asking for exception to this export limits because they simply, again, were running out of sugar, and they were in deep need of this sugar, and the exceptions were made, and a bit of more export been done. But we're just saying the market at that time clearly needed this. And obviously, if it wasn't Ukraine, it was simply someone else who were delivering this. This would probably be done. I mean, not as quick, not as agile, not as flexible, and maybe could also like put a little bit more on supply risk towards users, towards end users, and sugar users and their production. So the market, we see a little bit more balanced, but yeah, I think it's critical and important to for the users, from the user's perspective, obviously. It's critical and important to look at that's availability and supply security aspect, and to have that support in case any further market imbalances or shortages. I would
Thank you.
And yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Yuri. Christian, over to you. What is your perspective of this situation on the European and global sugar market, but of course with focus on Europe? Would you agree with the statement that basically the sugar producers both in Europe and the partners of Europe have rather good situation on the market? In fact, you can argue that there is room for everyone to continue production, to provide profit margins for the enterprises, and to continue to serve European customers. What's your position?
Microphone. Well, thank you very much.
Yes,
well, in trying to answer your question, I would like to highlight maybe a short number of features which are meaningful to the topic we are discussing today. Namely on the side of European producers. So as you probably know, Europe has this year produced around 15.8 million tons of sugar, white sugar, which makes the EU the third world producer of sugar, behind Brazil and India. And historically, one can say that EU has been and still is a significant player on the white market sugar worldwide, especially in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, which have been our traditional export markets. So we have been exporting, but we have also imported sugar quite significantly and under preferential conditions. Firstly, we import sugar from the ACP and the least developed countries, and this has been quite a significant economic contribution of Europe to the developing countries concerned. And secondly, we also import sugar from a list of origins that has expanded over the last 20 years. And notably, Ukraine is part of this list. So roughly, today we import 2.7 million tons, which is accounting for no less than 18% of our domestic consumption, which is quite a high figure considering we are close to self-sufficiency. And we export also more or less 3.5 million tons, and these are 23-24 campaign figures. So this means that in terms of trades, the EU sugar market can be qualified as an open market. So trades with the rest of the world is a normal and structural feature of our sector, and we perfectly accept this as a principle. However, I'd like to make the following remark. We consider that sugar has become increasingly sensitive over the years, and this is mainly for two reasons. One is related to the evolution of the general sugar policy of the EU, which has led to considerable deregulation of the sector, making the sugar sector one of the most deregulated worldwide. And we are talking about the 2017 reform. It has become a fact since then that the European market is exposed to the price volatility of the world market, which was not the case before. And this is clearly witnessed by the EU Price Observatory that is published monthly by the Commission. Maybe, Nazar, you have this a graph showing the variations of EU sugar price with compared to world market price. So what does this mean? Well, it means that volatility means that our producers are exposed to of course, very uncertain profits, sometimes losses, as we've experienced during a couple of years recently, and which add up, of course, to the weather unpredictability, which affects the production of beets. And a second reason for sugar being a sensitive product is linked to the considerable escalation in the EU environmental legislation in order to adapt to climate change, to adapt to environmental concerns on pesticides and plant protection. And this has resulted in restrictions and even bans concerning plant protection products. It has limited yields. It has therefore risen costs of production for both beet growers and sugar processors. Of course, I mean, we don't see adapting to climate change and respecting the environment as a problem in itself, but it becomes a problem when high environmental standards are not shared to the same extent by our competitors in the rest of the world. So today, European sugar producers are facing players who do not have exactly the same sanitary and environmental standards. And it's worth mentioning that this distortion of competition is to be seen both on external markets and the European domestic market itself. Now, it's easy to understand why level playing field has now become a central request of our sector, because we believe that trade cannot be sustainable on equal terms. This is a very obvious statement, but yet sometimes a very difficult one to be understood by our policymakers. So when it comes to EU-Ukrainian relations, we are actually talking about long-term and sustainable relations, meaning that a level playing field between Ukraine and the EU is really what we have to look for. So that is the objective, and this cannot happen overnight, of course. It needs a strategy, it needs reciprocity, it needs resources, and some time. So maybe that is opening the way to the discussion for what about the future, what's next, and I think that's really the most important topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your very clear position, very clear comments. And now over to Jana Kalushevska, Executive Director of Ukrainian Sugar Producers Association. Jana, I wonder whether you would like to pick where to pick where Christian concluded, specifically that how do you see whether Ukrainian exporters manage to deliver their products to the European consumers on the same level playing field with their European counterparts, European sugar producers, considering the situation, both on the other hand, luckily, exceptionally good price and consumption patterns in Europe, as well as globally. On the other hand, a very dire situation where the Ukrainian sugar sector finds itself in triple conditions of war, difficult logistics, considering how difficult it is to access the traditional non-European markets for Ukraine, and let's say economic instability and uncertainty, again related to war conditions. Jana, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nazar. Thank you for the invitation for such a discussion, an opportunity to highlight the vision of the Ukrainian sugar industry and its hopes maybe for further development. And it was very pleased to hear that our European colleagues are ready to talk about our future. Exactly what we want is to talk on the future and the benefits which we can have, both sides could have, if we'll find the necessary decision, maybe beneficial for both of these sides. And so, yes, exactly, we would like to call to our European partners to look at Ukraine and Ukrainian sugar market not only as a third country supplier, but a partner who seeks to build a common future with the European Union, and to look at the Ukrainian sugar industry as the future part of the European sugar industry. And in this regard, we could say that actually Ukrainian sugar industry is a natural continuation of European sugar belt, because we use European seeds, European crop protection products. We purchase European machinery for and equipment for our factories, and even what to say, our largest sugar producer has investment from Pfeiffer Langen. Actually, it's almost European. Well, it's European. And so we don't want to compete with the European producers, but we want to cooperate with them and to work with them for the food security of the European Union, and to strengthen the position, as I understand that now EU is the third largest producer of sugar in the world. So I hope that Ukraine will be able to strengthen its position with its own production. So, of course, we are very grateful for the opportunity to export our sugar since 2022, and it's really become a lifeline for us in the time that it was really almost impossible for industry to survive without this opportunity of export. And I'm speaking not only about sugar producers, but also I'm speaking about more than 700 farmers who are our sugar beet growers, and who at that time could not export their other products due to the problems with sea logistics. And of course, it was very nice to hear that. So this with this our export, we helped European customers to cope with the problem of deficit of sugar at that time. So it's quite a long introduction, but to move forward to the current situation. As you know, and it was in the presentation you shown, Nazar, that recently we are trying to increase our export to the world market, as our export to the European Union was stopped since the 1st of June. You know that it was made voluntary from Ukrainian producers, first of all, because we, as a responsible producers, we adhere to our international obligations. So we, when we saw that the quota limits were close, so we requested our government to limit exports of sugar to the European Union. So now for us, export to the European Union as a general is not even a question of the market with a good price. For us, it's almost the only opportunity to export, because export through the sea is still very risky, and maybe you know that large containers still don't enter Odessa. And last week's an incident when the missile strikes the ship proved that the risks are rather high. So logistics to our neighboring countries, delivery of sugar to our neighboring countries is the best decision for the industry and the best possibility for the industry to survive. As you know, we don't have opportunity to export to Central Asia, which were our traditional markets previously. So that's why we would like to find our way to cooperate with exactly with the European producers on the European markets. And of course, we understand all their requirements and all their rules which were on the market, and we would like to follow them. And since we signed the association agreement, Ukraine is working, and we as an industry are working on the reconciliation of its principles of food safety to those to the European Union, as well as some other standards. And several of our, there are sugar producers in Ukraine, which already takes responsibility and undertaking the responsibility on decarbonization and are reporting on their progress. And many other players are approaching this. So what I would like to say that we are ready to follow, and we understand that this is quite a long journey, but we would like to start it now, and we would like to have support of our European colleagues on this way.
Thank you. Thank you, Yana. In fact, I think our audience would be very much interested to know a little bit more about the state of play within the Ukrainian sugar beet farming sector and in the sugar sugar processing sector. I think no one should take for granted that Ukrainians are able to produce and ship sugar to Europe and to third country markets at competitive prices, while having to manage the horrible challenges of war and the disruptions that it brings. Perhaps we would be very much interested to hear also from you and also from your colleague, Mr. Igor Sheluk, the CEO of a Ukrainian sugar company. How do you see the situation within the sector, perhaps even at the enterprise level? Specifically, what are the challenges that a typical Ukrainian sugar company and their partners, the Ukrainian sugar beet farmers, experience, maybe from region to region, or in terms of logistics, in terms of inputs, in terms of ability to access key markets, and also perhaps having in mind that Ukraine is indeed on the path to European integration. That entails approximation of almost the entire, well, not almost, in the end of the day, we're talking about full approximation of EU legislation, including standards on sustainability. How the Ukrainian sugar sector eyes also this these challenges, these tasks, and whether you can handle this on your own, or would you really be in need of a financial, technical support, perhaps in order to have a true level playing field with your European counterparts, with your European competitors? I invite Igor Shaluk to take the floor if you're ready, Igor, and Yana also to contribute to this. Basically, the second question of our discussion. Igor or Yana, please, the floor is yours as you wish.
I'll try. I would like, if possible, I would like to make maybe a very brief introduction. I would like to show one slide, if possible. So
you can share your slide.
Demonstration. I'll try, but
share the screen. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you see? The?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So recently we have come across of many misconceptions that depict the Ukrainian sugar industry as a kind of frightening sugar Eldorado with almost unlimited potential. It's a pity. It's not right. So as Mr. Kachkin mentioned, that now Ukraine sugar industry, it's 33 factories. Actually, this season we will have only 29 which operate. As for the 4 which are not working, one is situated in the Kharkiv region, so it doesn't work for obvious reasons, and the future of other 3 factories depends on the market situation. Also, so we see last 5 years. So in last 5 years, the average area under sugar beet was roughly 225,000 hectares. Last 2 years, we have 250. So the estimation are these areas are divided between agricultural enterprises which are affiliated with sugar factories and independent farmers in proportion 60-40%. So as I mentioned, what 40% means roughly 700,000 small farming enterprises and farmers and so on, which are involved in sugar beet production. So this year we expect, it's, I suppose, interesting to hear, to know to our participants that this year we expect that sugar production will not exceed 1.7 million tons. Recently, our Ministry of Agriculture Policy made a forecast that the production will be 1.45 million tons, but we still need some time to confirm the figure because the season just started. We just started harvesting sugar beet. We see rather high sugar content, but it's quite difficult to extract the specifics this year. So consumption, internal consumption in Ukraine will remain on the same level, 200,000 tons. It's it's very briefly just for understanding of our participants, maybe it's interesting. And now I forward the floor for Igor to be more specific on the situation.
Igor, I think you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself. Please be mindful of the microphone.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Yana. Thank you, Nazar, for organizing this discussion. First of all, I would like to say that not only we are, but all Ukrainian producers, we are very grateful for European Union for such kind of support we receive in terms of liberalization trade since starting war, and thank you for support of our industry and our country. As Yana mentioned, Ukraine now is in the start of this journey to European Union. And of course, we understand we have to work a lot on integrating our industry, integrating our legislation for such kind of integrating and joining to European Union. As it was said that we are sugar producers, we use mainly European technology of growing sugar beet and producing sugar. We use European seeds, crop protection products. We use European equipment. So it would be very natural if we have possibility to partially export sugar to Europe Union. Of course, we are working a lot, our parliament working a lot on adapting our internal legislation to EU policies. And it would be, for me as a producer, it would be good to understand better the approaches of European Commission and European Union to the what kind of steps we need to do in terms of delivering this integration. Coming back to production side, I would say that in the last 2 years, our factory in 2022 was not operating as Russian army was very close to our factory. So we missed 2022 season, and we are operating in 2023 and 2024. If you wouldn't have possibility to export sugar to European Union, the situation in our industry would be much worse, since the Black Sea was closed and we did not have possibility to export sugar to the third countries. So thank you very much for European Union for such kind of support that we had the possibility to export to Europe Union. And I hope that we will have such kind of roadmap how we can be in the European Union in the future. I think it's natural that we will have a joint future and we will have possibility to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor and Yana. A very quick follow-up question, if I may. You mentioned that 2022, the Ukrainian sugar sector was in a critical state because of the initial shock of the war and basically cut off logistics through the Black Sea to traditional third country markets for Ukrainian sugar producers. But I wonder, what is the situation now? To what extent you have been able to recover your access to markets beside the EU, and what's the role? What's the current situation around the logistics for the sugar exports? Can you share with us a few updates in this regard, Yana and Igor?
Okay, but the presentation you've shown us, there are some slides on Ukrainian export as well, and they're very true. So you can show, or I can show them. Since 1st of June, we didn't export to the European Union, but we continue to export to the countries of Mediterranean and North Africa. Also to some European countries which are not members of the of the European Union, such as Montenegro and I suppose large amounts went to and I'm sorry, not Albania, not Bosnia, not somewhere on Balkans as well. Yes, but of course amounts are not very large. So we have 10 and 13,000 tons of export in July, 10,000 tons in August. Now we continue to export to these directions, but as I have already mentioned, the sea logistics is quite a problem. The Cannes Summit documents are not issued in Odessa still, so we to have opportunity to export to the world market with ships, we have to deliver our sugar to Romania, to the ports of Romania, and to from Constance it goes further. So this is the situation. Of course, we'll use all the possibilities, all the opportunities to increase the share of our sea export to the countries of our traditional countries, MENA countries. So we have what we have. We still don't have large containers. We don't have unrisky shipments. So every shipment, every delivery through the sea is a risk. As for Central Asia countries such as Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and so on, so they are closed for us. It's understandable why. We just can't deliver there. So this is the reason. This is the situation.
Thank you. Igor, would you like to add anything?
Yeah. Since Russia continue missile attack of port infrastructure as well, so through Black Sea there is some sugar export, but it is limited, and this kind of logistic is quite expensive. So as Yana said, that containers export is not possible at the moment because big container ships are not coming to Ukrainian ports. So it means that Ukraine this year had to export approximately 500,000 tons of sugar. And if European Union this year don't increase the quota, so it would be quite problematic for us to export all this volume. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor and Yana. Let's move to the third, perhaps the most important question of all, also taking stock of our discussion so far. What should be the next move, both for Ukraine and the EU, in terms of trade and agriculture products as far as sugar is concerned? Let me remind everyone that in June next year, the current temporary scheme of autonomous trade measures will expire. The European Union, the European Commission and Ukraine are engaged, or they will be engaged yet in talks on how to set up bilateral trade on a more permanent basis, hopefully until the time when Ukraine finalizes its pre-accession negotiations with the EU. And probably there is a growing consensus, already an established consensus between Kyiv and Brussels, that returning back to the times of the association agreement, as Mr. Kachka rightly pointed out, concluded in a completely different era, 17 years ago, is no longer an option. But how shall we shape our common future, since we are together in this situation? How we should approach this in the light of the current market outlook and potential developments of the market outlook in the near future, the ability of Ukraine, limited abilities of Ukraine to produce and export sugar to the EU, and of course the political requirements of sustainability of Green Deal that European sugar manufacturers do face today and will face increasingly more in the future. I suggest that each of our panelists would try to answer this question, and we will do the same in the same order as before. I invite Yuri, as representatives of consumers, to try to answer these questions. What's next? What is your vision of, let's say, either an ideal or perhaps the most balanced solution to the problem of how we should manage trade in sugar between EU and Ukraine? Yuri, please.
Thanks, Nazar. Yeah. Well, I think it probably obviously depends on as well on the horizon how you see the perspective. And you asked just about an ideal probably like within some years Ukraine is going to be much closer in terms of trade to European Union, and probably is going to be something like a common trade, but ideally maybe with Ukraine being one of a European Union member, and then it's going to be like the common market basically. But for the next few years in a perspective, probably this political angle needs to be taken into account obviously, but we leave it to European Commission. But from purely trade perspective, as we've seen, European market is in need of some import flow anyway, and is gonna remain like this. So something like 1.5-2 million ton of import will be required. And I think we see it kind of in a more predictable, stable way. So yeah, definitely not the previous small quota regime, but I think something more sizable could definitely be considered. And with the market, which is always in need of 2 million ton of input, I think something like a more sizable tier Q with the amount up to 500,000 or something like this, or maybe like with the clear roadmap potentially going forward to the trade, more common trade, let's say. But I think the predictability and the reliability in the supply, and having another second origin enhanced, that would be quite important and valued by end users, because as said, we first of all prioritize and we value the supply security. Also, which is worth probably noting, the Ukrainian sugar is pretty much this is white sugar rather than like a big part of other imports, which is coming normally like in rows, and this can be routed to the users a bit quicker, and again the market can be balanced itself quicker. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration as well. Also longer term as well, with the it's also sugar beet, which potentially can be in the same framework with as all other European sugar beet in terms of like obviously traceability and other parameters, and it's already there in terms of traceability. Obviously, like this is a beet sugar, much easily traceable. It's pretty much this. So yeah, so this I think we would welcome a little bit more transparency, a little bit more of a predictability, and definitely reliability in a supply with something at least a sizable, more sizable access to the market from Ukrainian industry.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Yuri. Christian, over to you. What's your take of the either ideal future or mutually acceptable scenario? Thank you.
Thank you, Nazar, for the question. Just before discussing the way forward, I mean, just a quick comment on the ATM regulation that was adopted in April last. We believe it's a satisfactory compromise from our point of view, because it's actually the combination between two apparently opposite objectives. The one being the need, of course, to show a concrete solidarity with regard to the exceptional situation in Ukraine, and there's no doubt about our willingness to share and to show this solidarity. That's on the one hand, and on the other hand, the need to nevertheless to regulate these exceptional imports in a proportionate way in order not to create conditions of a severe and structural market disruption in the EU itself. So ATM is more about managing the exceptional situation, and the way forward is more in looking towards a more stabilized and peaceful situation. Again, on the ATM, I mean, we agree that the ATM regulation should not be renegotiated each year. This is, I think, an unnecessary waste of time and negotiation resources. So for the sake of clarity and legal predictability, and there I agree with Yuri, it is by far better to agree on a permanent set of provisions which could be applied until the date Ukraine becomes a full member of the EU. And in that respect, we are following the EU Commission way of doing, i.e. To renegotiate and update the association agreement to the new situation. And that negotiation process has started before the summer. But in order to have an updated trade regime in place by June 25, I think it means that enough progress should be made by the negotiators before the end of the current ATM regulation. Because if that were not the case, I mean, it would be quite obvious that for everyone that the present ATM would need to be reconducted for another year, I suppose, technically. So now more about the back to normal situation. It goes without saying that we all wish that this back to normal situation to be there soon, but at the moment, unfortunately, nobody really knows when the war will be over, what Ukraine will look like after the war, and how many years the accession process will last. So in other words, the date of accession of Ukraine to the EU is completely unknown today. This means that we, EU and Ukraine have to address and to manage the exceptional war situation on the one hand, as well as to prepare for a normalized peace situation on the other hand, with a smooth integration of Ukraine. Again, I repeat, a complete level playing field in terms of competition, and the adoption of the acquis communautaire. Acquis communautaire, I don't know if you're familiar with that notion. It's a French term referring to the whole set of legislation and jurisprudence developed over the years by the EU. In other words, it's another word for the total legal order of the European Union. And that's quite a challenge. I mean, for a new country to adapt and to align to this acquis communautaire. So this is basically what the renegotiation of the association agreement is all about, really. And as CFS, and again, given the many unknowns of the equation, I mean, we are advising to address the issue pragmatically and to gradually build up until a full alignment. So we strongly believe that trade liberalization should be progressive, starting from an initial TRQ. I don't know what the exact figure should be for this starting point, and preferably on the same basis as the present management, that is first come first served management system, while keeping at the same time a set of safeguards and monitoring provisions. That is to say, for example, a system of export licenses. I mean, that was referred at the beginning of our discussion. Export licenses and especially also rules of origins, in order to better control the origin of the sugar and the exporters, and to avoid any possible fraud or circumvention of the legislation. Secondly, also a system that makes it possible to maybe improve the TRQ, this initial TRQ, on the condition that the alignment of Ukraine to the acquis communautaire, again, is underway and effective. Again, it's the idea that trade development can only be possible if competition is not distorted. So we are looking for convergence with the EU legislation standards, especially concerning food safety, plant protection, traceability, etc. Third idea would be to keep just in case, I mean, a safeguard clause in the event of market disturbances, and well, globally maybe a reciprocity in the global approach in the development of trade relations. This, I think, is reasonable and rational ground for trade development between Ukraine and the EU. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian, for your comments. They are very useful and, of course, very how to say, illustrative, we hope, of the position by the European sugar producing sector. Now I'd like to pass the floor, of course, to our Ukrainian panelists, Yana and Igor. But before I do that, perhaps I would like to register and, let's say, to comment on two important topics that were raised by Yuri as representative of the consumers of sugar. Indeed, I think it's in everyone's interest to have the predictability and let's say certainty of how the scope and rules of trade in sugar would develop between EU and Ukraine beyond the current exceptional period of time, as Christian rightly said. And in this respect, just pointing out to very obvious elements, or even one would say shortcomings of the current system of ATMs, whereby even if we were talking about the safeguard measures, the safeguard system or mechanism, which usually involves having a clear picture of what's going on and whether the imports do produce an impact and eventually to injury to domestic industry, needs to be investigated, and the parameters for measures should be based on that. Regretfully, sugar, as a number of other sensitive products, were excluded from this normal course of action as far as the safeguard system is concerned. So I think it's just, in my comments, it's in the interest of all the involved parties, the consumers, the domestic producers in Europe, and exporters like Ukraine, is to have a solid ground for informed decisions when we talk about long-term solutions. So in this respect, sugar is not an exception, but even a very good example of that. So with that, I do invite Yana and Igor to comment from the Ukrainian exporters' perspective. How should we try to shape the future EU-Ukraine trade system as far as sugar is concerned? Yana and Igor, please.
I'm sorry, I have some problems with the camera trying to switch it. But so, of course, we are fully agree with the proposal and the idea of the predictability and traceability and all the necessary points, all the points and the issues which are necessary to form a normal civilized trade between European Union and Ukraine. Of course, we as producers are ready to provide any kind of assistance to find their forms of which are necessary to increase or to sustain the amount of possibilities to export sugar to the European Union on the level of the current level, at least. Because of course, and it's good that there is understanding that the level which we have until the 2021 is quite really it's not impossible, but it's not desirable, taking into consideration all our current situation within the industry and the country. So I would like to mention that, of course, the opportunity, the possibility to export for us, for Ukrainian sugar industry, is a chance to survive in general. Before the war, the consumption in Ukraine was at the level of 1.2 million. Now we have 900,000. So we lost 300,000 tons of consumption within Ukraine. And it's hardly to imagine that it will be restored. We have more than 4 million people, Ukrainian citizens, which are now in this European Union. So we don't know if these people come back to Ukraine or no. So this is why I don't say that their industry is in danger, but I just want you to understand the current situation that we operate in uncertainty mostly, and our producers want to have predictability and want to have certainty at least in some issues. And so what we would like to have as an industry, of course, we are grateful, and we see that it's very good decision to allow us to the quota of 262,000 tons for the 2024 year. Of course, taken into consideration all we had about the deficit and possible import in future, we would like to see the increase in this amount. Of course, following with the necessary amendments from our side. I mean, this following Green Deal and so on. Because really, Ukraine is much more closer to the European Union in all senses, and in terms of policy culture and in terms of production approaches and so on, than, for example, Brazil. Because if it's a question of choice to purchase in Ukraine or to purchase in Brazil, and they have their own issues with deforestation and so on. So it's also the question of sustainability. So we are ready to go forward. We would like to have certainty, to understand their amounts, the limits of our possible export. Of course, we would like to see increase in it, and we are ready to have self-regulations as the industry, and all the Ukrainian producers understand the necessity of such approaches and are ready to move with necessary steps in order to have opportunity to export in Europe and to be the part of the European sugar market.
Thank you, Yana. Igor, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would like to add, actually, I would like to tell the same, that we need predictivity. We as producers and exporters, we are ready to comply with the EU standards. We are ready to increase production standards and comply with the EU rules or new rules. I would say that this possibility to export to EU is a vital possibility for our industry, since due to unexpected logistic through Black Sea. At the moment, EU is it is the only reliable way for exporting sugar. If we don't have it in the next year, we as producers will need to decrease our production. And thank you very much for European colleagues for such kind of support.
Thank you. Thank you, Igor. Indeed, we can continue discussing this topic, which probably will require additional hour, at least to cover all the angles of, let's say, how the future trade regime as far as sugar is concerned should be shaped. Also, there is another big point of concern is the time frame, because unfortunately we have a deadline, the expiry of the current ATM regime quickly moving towards us. This is the 5th of June. And unfortunately, the European Union is very much notorious for its very slow and how to say convoluted decision making. So there is a real risk that we will not be able to come up with a solution, long-term solution by that date. So probably in certain respect, the European Union will have to answer the question whether there will be any continuity or there will be a big gap. And basically a drastic deterioration for Ukrainian exporters to continue to trade with the EU, and sugar is not an exception. But probably that would require more discussions, and UCAP and its Brussels office, the European Integration Committee, are more than happy to provide platform for discussions. But unfortunately, the time is running low, and now it's the time to move to the questions from our audience. We will start from written questions that we have received from participants in the course of the registration. And for your convenience, I will bring them online on screen. And in the meantime, as we'll be answering these prior questions, I invite our listeners to post their questions in the chat window of this webinar, because it will be easier for our panelists to read them in advance, to prepare and to answer them to the best of their abilities. So let me share with you the text of questions we have received before. I hope they are well seen here. Do you see them well? And I will read the first question. What is the effect of Ukrainian sugar imports into the EU on ACP and LDC sugar industries? ACP, it's African, Caribbean, Pacific countries. These are the countries that used to be in very close relationship with European countries before in the past. And LDC is the least developed countries according to the UN's classification. So we're talking about the replacement between Ukrainian sugar and sugarcane coming from ACP and LDC markets in Bulgaria and Romania. Who would like to answer this question first? Perhaps Yuri, would you like to pick it up on this? Do you see the questions well on screen?
I do, yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, certainly, as said, there is probably some substitution, of course, of raw sugar with white sugar from Ukraine. But as was mentioned before, I mean, for example, in 22-23, the import need was quite substantial, quite big. Now, because still there was room for raw refined, and it was a room for white sugar for Ukraine. Longer term, I think is probably exactly again from more established regime, from more predictability, from more transparency. I think everyone would benefit, including as well ACP and LDC, because it could be countries, it could be more predictable from them in terms of the trade flows. But yeah.
Thank you. Other colleagues, maybe Christian, would you like to add anything to this question from your perspective?
Well, not much really. I mean, concerning this first question, yes, I mean, there has been some substitution between the ACP, LDC sugar with Ukrainian sugar. We've heard about ACPs sort of complaining about the situation, and it's true that imports of ACP and LDC sugar has been lower than the previous year. So I don't know exactly how the market is going to strike a balance between the different origins, but maybe it's more a matter for the EU to see if they want to have a sort of political balance between these origins, because as I mentioned before, the EU imports from ACP and LDC are also part of a sort of development program of the EU in terms of economic assistance. So I don't know exactly what the political impact of this situation will be on the diplomatic relations between ACP and the EU. I mean, that's not really problem for the market in itself. I mean, the market is adjusting, technically and irrespective of maybe of the political considerations. So that's all I can say on this question.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Christian. I see that in this question there is a little bit, there is at least one relevance to the Ukrainian context, and perhaps Yana and Igor would like to answer this. Which Ukrainian authorities consider giving duty-free quotas, free access for ACP and LDC countries to the Ukrainian market, or some safeguard mechanism? Perhaps even this question is more relevant to answer to Mr. Taras Kachka as representative of the Ukrainian government. If Mr. Kachka is still with us, he might consider answering this question. But in the meantime, Yana and Igor, from the perspective of Ukrainian producers, do you think there is still room for less developed countries sugar to found on the Ukrainian market? What's your take on this? Very briefly.
Okay, well, really, it's quite an unexpected question for me to answer. Okay, so there are a lot of questions which are connected with it. For example, if these countries are ready to supply to Ukraine through sea, taking into consideration all these risks. So the first issue is logistics, how these countries could supply to Ukraine. Second issue is connected if it's possible to refine necessary amounts of sugar, cane sugar, because I don't understand, is it refined already or it's need refining? Raw sugar for refining. So if I'm not mistaken, now in Ukraine, there are only 2 factories which are able to refine sugar, and they are situated not very close to the ports. So it's rather some rhetoric issue. I don't think that's possible.
Very good. Then let's move quickly to the second question, which is really more for our Ukrainian panelists to answer. The forecast of sugar beet area in Ukraine under cultivation for the next season, and logistic bottlenecks in the Black Sea ports. I think that part has been already answered. And your forecast of sugar beet area cultivation next season. Diana, if you can.
So the answer on this question will be more precise, maybe in early November, as most of the independent producers, beet producers, will be decided on their future plan, taking into considerations the alternatives they have with other crops, so and margins which they see on other crops. But maybe it's my modest estimate is we will have less than 20% less on the sugar beet next year. It's just a very, very preliminary forecast. Maybe Igor will comment on his plans, of the plans of his company.
As Igor is thinking, let's move to the next question, which is again, Jan, is best for you to answer. How would you comment about the possible distribution of quotas for sugar exports to the EU among Ukrainian producers? And immediately, maybe the second question, the trends of sugar consumption and ethanol production in Ukraine. The sugar consumption already covered that. Maybe if you can talk about the ethanol prospects. Thank you. Jana, you are muted again.
Sorry, our association has proposal to distribute the quota for export to the European Union among producers in proportion to its share in production this year, which will make export to the European Union more balanced and more predictable. So we are optimistic about the chances that such proposal will be adopted by the government, but still we don't have the decision. but we really discussing understand the necessity and the importance of export licenses and so on. So we are ready and we are negotiating the possibilities of it to do it.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
As for their bioethanol, maybe you know that recent months, the law was passed in Ukraine, which makes obligatory blending, fuel blending. So since the 1st June of 2025, it will be obligatory to have 5% of bioethanol in fuels in Ukraine. So, and my colleagues from Bioethanol Association are optimistic and they are ready to move forward and they have some optimism on it. So very briefly on bioethanol.
Very good. Thank you. And the next question, I think it has already been answered. The assessment of Ukrainian sugar sector opportunities and difficulties in the event of future EU membership. I think we have already answered that question, pointing out first to the challenge of approximating the EU legislation, including the new one that is coming in context of EU climate policies and sustainabilities. But Jana, if you wish to answer this question, maybe in a short but pointful manner, that would be very helpful.
I think it's quite impossible to answer this question shortly. So okay, we see both opportunities and difficulties, mostly because taking into consideration the situation of war, our producers don't have necessary access to us financing, for example, and to finance modernizations on sugar factories, maybe which will be necessary to cope with some additional EU requirements and so on. So the difficulty is a lack of financing, maybe a lack of possibility even to invite foreign specialists, because a lot of foreign companies, European companies, forbid to their specialists to come to Ukraine now. So we just have problems to have some advisory and or engineering on something of this kind. This is one of the difficulties of the current season, and. So, but nevertheless, we've talked about it a lot during the session, that for us, actually, there is no other way when the way towards the European Union. Now we don't see any other opportunities. Or maybe to stop war, which will allow us to increase our sea export to the world market.
Thank you, Jana. And the last question in this series, I think the question really is trying to answer to the existing thoughts and stereotypes about the market and the sector, that Ukrainian imports are driving down the prices, while there is the largest stockpile of sugar beets and sugar since 2020. I think today we have really looked into the figures and the graphs and the trends, and I'm afraid that the figures speak otherwise, but I do invite everyone to very quickly, just in under 1 minute, to share whether you agree with this statement or not. And perhaps, Yuri, I'm afraid that the multinationals, they refer to your members. How do you respond to this? And very quickly, considering that we discussed this extensively.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I would pick on the first part of this, when colleagues from CB saying that there is no sugar deficit in the European Union. I think it's to some extent, I don't necessarily fully agree to that statement, because it's probably a different angle of different standpoint of view how you look the balance. Because yes, if you potentially take just the figure of sugar consumption for European Union internal domestic need, and probably you could argue there is quite enough of sugar, and it can be covered from European sugar production. But it can't be seen like this, absolutely, because every year from not the sugar being used in European Union, but also like over 2.5 million or almost like 3 million ton of sugar, European sugar, is being exported out of European Union in finished products, and in products like Mars, PepsiCo, etc. Like what's the brands mentioned there, and this sugar needs to be used within European Union. It is also like internal European Union consumption, and obviously, like if you look at the balance like this, how normally you would look at that, a total consumption within. So everything was being consumed and eaten by European Union people, and everything that's been consumed by European Union-based companies to send the export and also drive the European Union economy. And add a lot of value to it. So you've seen basically the balance, and it is in deficit, and it was shown it was in big deficit in 22-23, and it was it was clearly demonstrated by the balance. That's why I think, I mean, we should look at that at the balance sheet from that perspective, because this is an export of finished goods, sugar containing finished goods from European Union to the other countries, including Ukraine, maybe, by the way. This is also a very important part of European Union economy, and this is highly added value products, which drives a lot of value for European Union economy. And this is important to have enough of sugar and to get these things running. That would be my key comment here. And then I don't want to go again into the discussion of the balance sheet and the prices evaluation and ups and downs of commodities. Thanks.
Indeed. Thank you, Yuri. Christian, would you like to add to this, although we have discussed this extensively?
Yes, I think we have discussed extensively. I also don't particularly want to dig into price considerations or commenting the balance sheet. I mean, Yuri is right. But I don't know how many ways there are to read and to consider a balance sheet. I mean, to me, there's only one. I mean, you just look at production, you look at consumption, and they clearly can see that the European Union is very close to self-sufficiency. Of course, there are exports, imports, but in the end, I mean, we can see that it's more or less balanced, especially with the taking up again of the EU sugar production, and I think this coming year will be a sort of a average good campaign, hopefully. So probably the balance sheet should look pretty much like the previous one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Then we are quickly coming to the end of our event. We still have a few online questions posted as our listeners were listening to the debate. I would pick up at least two. One is related to logistics. The first question that was related to the Danube route by barges from Rani Ismail to the Romanian port of Constanța. I wonder, Yana, whether you would pick up this question very briefly. Exporting sugar by barges from Rani Ismail to Constanța and Serbia and Hungary.
Okay, of course we know this road, and our the sugar producers calculate their delivery, but it's still rather expensive because there are some peculiarities. But this opportunity exists, but it's more expensive now that we can afford to ourselves. So it's better to export with other ways to Balkan countries such as Macedonia or to Montenegro, because and as for other countries, we can use Danube to export sugar where European countries are closed for us because of wood.
Very good. And then let us pick up the last questions in this series, the one that addressed to the European producers, that European producers increased planting this year. Should it be seen as substitution for imports from Ukrainian LDCs? And Christian, I think it's naturally falls to you to answer this question. How would you comment the plans or the actual increase of planting by EU producers and how it may affect the market in the months or a year ahead? Would you like to pick up this question?
Well, it's a difficult one because essentially it's a collection of individual decisions, in the different EU countries. So is there a single motivation for these upward trends in production? I don't know. I don't know. What is seems clear to me that we are coming back to what I would consider as normal levels of production, because we've also had a downsize of production, especially beet production, after the many sanitary problems, and now the whole question is for the beet growers to regain confidence in what they are planting, and of course sugar production goes along with that. I mean, but I don't see that there's a general policy or general sort of decision made by collectively by sugar producers to respond to one issue. Of course, I mean, it's completely uncoordinated at European level, as well as national level, of course.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Dear participants, I think we have come to the end of our event. I'm very thrilled that Deputy Minister Kachka had the time to stay with us. And I hope probably because our discussion was interesting and probably helped him to formulate some conclusions and good ideas for his work as Ukraine's trade representative. Mr. Kachka, do you think you could share with us your thinking, whether you picked up any interesting thoughts or conclusions in our discussion, and whether this could somehow inform, the way forward for the Ukrainian government, for the Ministry of the Economy, how to approach trade with EU, at least as far as sugar sector is concerned. Please.
Thank you. I think that first of all, the discussion just confirmed the correct approach that industries should have more voice in this discussion. So it should not be government-led, but rather Commission and government should support the dialogue between the industries. As I said, that what has started as a political support to Ukraine suffering from Russian aggression now is in a little bit different setting. So we really rely on your support, continue to rely on your support, and this support should let's say should grow as well with developments we have. But in order to find a balance on this particular market, I think that we need to have an understanding between industries first, because I think that this is the only way to move forward. I don't think that we have any major obstacles in terms of policy, so that our policy will be driven by EU rules and EU policy, but we need to take into account as well let's say the status of intra-EU discussion about further steps in policies, because what we see is that there will be a stage of critical reflection on climate policy and other measures recently adopted by the EU, but we will definitely follow the policy solutions that will be with consensus. And in the EU, this is our strategy for the last 15 years in agriculture, that we generally follow the rules of the European Union. So that's why for us it is important that the industries also understand that Ukraine is not starting from let's say from the beginning in terms of applying EU rules, and we are rather advanced on it. And the most interesting is that definitely I think that we know that the opinions about the role of Ukrainian sugar on EU market depends on the stakeholders represented by this or another association. So it is well known by all participants of this discussion. So that's why there are different angles, different points of view. but it is good that we have the discussion that involves Ukrainian association as well. So that it means that this is a really good discussion between all stakeholders that will give a possibility to make more, let's say, balanced decisions by Commission and Ukrainian government. So that's why, for me, it was interesting to listen to all statements and just to confirm that your understanding of situation actually confirms that there is a space for very rational decision, which will be mutually beneficial. However, it is, let's say, trivial to say, but it's true. That what we are looking now is a balanced solution for trade in sugar between Ukraine and the EU, and we have all possibilities for this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kachka. Taras, I think that really validates our our event today. I think we served this purpose if we hear such an encouraging signal from your side. Now I invite Dr. Alex Lisica, President of UCAB, to conclude our event and perhaps to share with us your take on the resume, on the outcomes of our discussion, and perhaps your wishes for the way forward as far as the sugar market is concerned. Alex, please.
Thank you very much. I will be really short because we are running out of time, and I do really thank to everyone panelist for participation here, for discussion. That's exactly what I've said in the beginning, and I do completely agree with Taras Kachka that it's a good start for conversation between actually representatives of both industries, both sides. And that's a good start, but it's not means that we have found a kind of compromise or we have found a kind of decision, but we have to talk about the future, and that's exactly what the people said here. So I'm really happy that we have had and started such kind of discussions here. So once again, thank you very much to the all participants, to panelists, and a special thank is of course Nazar to you for the excellent moderation. And we have already for the next months another one hot topic, so that will be poultry. After sugar will come poultry, which another one big issue between the European Union and Ukraine. So stay with us next month. So it will be really hot months again. So thank you very much and all the best to everyone.